Welcome. We're really happy to see so many of you here today to hear all about Greensboro's water. I don't think they're going to talk about ice, but just water. We have plenty of ice. Just two or three little announcements before we start. The Society's been really, really busy this year, and among the things that they've done is the Hazen Road Dispatch, 40 years of the Hazen Road Dispatch. And if you haven't seen it, just thumb through it over there. I see Charlie Morrissey here, who's one of the editors, and Gail Sangre did a marvelous job of that. So do take a peek at it if you haven't seen it before. We're doing a lot at the building. We now have a new fire protection system, which is a good idea. And also something, if the heat goes down, that's another system that has just gone in. But one of the most exciting things is, oh, here's Ernest. Thank you.
Somebody said this was formal.
You look wonderful.
You know what?
The banker.
That's right.
They don't work on Sunday.
It's our new web presence. You really ought to go on the Greensboro Historical Society and put your name in and see what it says about you. Because there are the genealogical data from the Society is now being, what do you call it, transferred, uploaded, or whatever. Kyle is working on that, and it's thanks to him and Tom Anastasio and Jenny Jenkins. And it has all kinds of wonderful things like Larry Lumsden is there, an interview with him. So it's really, it has a lot of stuff. So you might like to see that. If you didn't see our December newsletter, please take one. It's back there on the table. And I did want to say that in June, the end of June, there is something called the Vermont History Expo at Tunbridge. And they do this every 2 years, the Vermont Historical Society. And most of the historical societies all over Vermont do come and do a program. And this year the theme is water, which is what spurred us on to do this water program. We're going to have an exhibit this coming summer at the Historical Society. And today we are so fortunate to have here Matt Smith, John Mackin, Ernest Machia to tell us about the water system here. But before that, we thought you might like to know about why and how Greensboro was settled because of the water systems. And Jenny Stoner is going to explain that to us.
Thank you, Nancy. Did a little research and wrote very careful notes, and of course I left them home. So you're going to be very blessed, but really to give a little bit of the context of water, that the first water mill was built and operated in Greensboro less than 2 years after the first settler settled. And in 1791, we had the first mill by the outlet. And see this fancy pointer that Jenna had right here at the outlet. We had that first sawmill, and then 2 years later, he added a grist mill. And that just is an indication of how important mills were to be able to increase the power this was before electricity, before engines, internal combustion engines, before steam power, before electricity. So in order to enhance the strength of men and animals, water power was the resource that was available. And mills were so popular that there were many all over in the 1800s, early 1800s. There were 9 mills in Greensboro. There's some here at the outlet. Up here is a grist mill and a sawmill, another sawmill. The green are all sawmills. The yellow are grist mills. There's a shingle mill, a felting mill for taking wool and felting it to make it a warmer fabric. And so that the mills were a very, very important part of bringing the community together. For the grist mill, farmer would bring his grain, and it would be turned into flour, and then the miller got his miller's share, which was 1/16 of the grain or the flour, would be his payment. And that was really an important part of the economy. And the mills continued to be important. In fact, many of you may know that Greensboro Bend is Greensboro Bend because a couple of Greensboro entrepreneurs wanted to have a mill there, and they wanted to be able to ship their logs to on the railroad. And so $18,000 was raised to make the railroad go to the bend and come around instead of a loop, instead of going straight another direction. So that's another indication of how important the mills were to the economy. Another factor about the mills is obviously they were built of wood. And guess what? Wooden structures sometimes catch fire. And of the original mills, there are a number that caught fire, and some were rebuilt and some were not. But I think that this may be one reason that the water district is really called a fire district. That the water and fire went together, and when you get your water bill and it says fire district, you sort of wonder why. And I don't know, but I think that seems like one of the connections it might be. And the importance of the mills lasted a long time. There was, some of the water mills lasted as long as the 1940s. So that it really was an important part of the economy and of the development of Greensboro. And this summer, you're going to see some of the things here, but the exhibit of the historic part of the mills will be a part of the exhibit on water at the Historical Society. So that's just a little hint to give you a sense that it really is an interesting aspect of how our life here got organized and how people were able to be a self-sustaining community. Because without the mill, it was lumber. In fact, one of the stories of Aaron Hill is that he had a mill, and of course it had to be in a stream. There had to be running water, but if he didn't, then he made a flume to make the water flow down. And that when the spring thaws came and the water came, he had a way so that he would sit at night and use his feet to make the pump go to make the mill. And so there are all sorts of stories about how mills were important. And in his diaries, he talks about how much he's paid for different logs and different kinds of wood, and that this really is a way in which water had a tremendous impact in addition to the household and animals and all the uses that we think of with water. So with that little context to broaden it to the economic aspects of water, now I'll turn it over to our distinguished commissioners of the Water Company.
All right, well, the link between fire and water is tenuous. It comes and goes, as you will hear. So I'm going to say something as a member of the Prudential Committee of the Fire District, Greensboro Fire District number 1. There's a Greensboro Fire District number 2, and that's Ernie, and that's in the Bend. We do drinking water. That's about all we do, in spite of our name. There are 3 members of the Prudential Committee on this one. Myself, John is the chair, Greg Giselle. John has done 40 years, 35, 40 years, and he will show you the map of where we serve water, and he'll answer all the questions and tell all the stories about the Lyles family. All right, 104 years ago, it's 1912, the Greensboro Fire District's first Prudential Committee was voted in. Doofer, Cuthbertson, Drown, with Al DeBrun, Janet's grandfather, as chief, and Bert Willey as treasurer. Bert Willey is Robert Hearst's great-great-grandfather. In 1912, and for some years afterwards, the fire district did only fire, in part because there was a Greensboro Water Company. Incorporated in 1911, with directors W.S. Ingalls as president, Baker, Barrington, Kaiser, and Goss. And in January of 1912, they bought some land on top of Baker Hill from the Baker family, the Baker farm, and the rights to some springs on that Baker farm. And in 1912, the Caledonia Record writes that, quote, contractor Demers has completed the reservoir, 250 feet long, 150 feet wide, and 12 feet deep in the middle. Only in the middle, John. It's been modified, we're not quite sure when, but we have on the same site a 150,000 gallon reservoir. One of these, oh yeah, the framed map there says the reservoir is 10,000 gallons. That comes from Janet's garage. So it's a 150,000 gallon reservoir on the southeastern flank of Baker Hill, 400, 500, 600 feet above the Lumsden farm. You get there by the Reservoir Road. So the water obviously flows downhill, across the Perrin farm field, into Windermere, along the lake to the village, all by gravity flow, since the reservoir is about 300 feet higher than Willie's. Over the years, we've expanded the distribution system, dug 4 wells now on Baker Hill, abandoned the springs, and this past fall, that reservoir got a new pre-stressed concrete roof. Now, John, why don't you show everybody on that map there, or you can describe the roads where we now have water lines.
Well, we haven't added any water lines. Can you hold that there?
A little bit.
Here's the reservoir here. It flows this way. We feed Black's Point seasonal line. That has a new 2-inch line. The line there previously was 1.25 inches, and the engineers figured that if everyone flushed their toilet at the same time, there wouldn't be enough water to do that. I don't think that's ever happened though. We go all the way out here. This is to where the new theater is going to go. We feed Randolph Road, which is strictly a seasonal line. We go to the country club, we go beyond the country club actually, all the way to the Wilson farm, and we go to the nursing home. That's pretty much the extent of
the elementary school.
Elementary school feed line that's new. It went from 4 to 8 inches, so now they have adequate fire protection. So we have a 12-inch main, right, which is that big piece. Replace the 6-inch main. So there's 3.5 times as much water in the pipe as there was before. So there's a lot of water there for fire protection. The 8-inch line goes up from Willie's to past the firehouse to the theater and also to the elementary school. So that's adequate for the 1,000-gallon-a-minute pumpers that we all have now, because back when the first fire truck was around, it was 250 gallons a minute. And the danger is a 1,000-gallon-a-minute pumper pumps with a 6-inch line, it can crush the line, and that pretty much destroys the water system. So that's kind of why we have to do that.
So, for the historians in you, Black's Point was added in 1955, Lakeview Elementary in 65, nursing home in 75, the fire station, many of you remember, in 2014, and the theater 2015. In February of 1914, the Caledonia Record writes, quote, the Greensboro Water Company has declared and paid a dividend of 4% on their capital stock. So this was a money-making operation. So you should all be really happy, because now we pretty much lose money every year. The water company often needed more water for a host of reasons, and they had to purchase more springs in Baker Hill. Eventually they owned 5 springs. They held their 1919 meeting in the hose house, suggesting that the water company and the fire district were, in fact, connected at the hip somehow. Maybe Al DeBrune was the glue. So the Greensboro Fire District number 1, that first met in 1912, was incorporated in 1925 by Act 180 of the General Assembly of Vermont. They were then, and we are now, a municipality, separate from the town, and run by the Prudential Committee. It wasn't until 1940 that the fire district bought the land, reservoir, and holdings of the Greensboro Water Company and thereby became a fire and water outfit. They paid $14,000 to the water company. The district's ledgers henceforth separated all of the water expenses from their fire expenses. You can see that in all the records that Janet's been keeping for all these years, waiting for this day. In the 40s, we see expenses for reading meters and taking in the meters for the winter, suggesting the meters were only there for the summer folk, because the meters would freeze in the winter. Later, in 1979, Connected at the Hip breaks down. The town buys the fire station, trucks, and hoses from the district for $1. So now, we, the fire district, has only drinking water while keeping the confusing name fire district. We get a lot of fire mail. The water rates for 1924 are listed on a sheet up here along with some other goodies. It also says there that washing automobiles will not be allowed without permission of the directors. Got to talk to John and me and Craig. In 1941, they do away with water meters and they hire Everett Lyles, Janet's father, and direct him to visit every home and barn in the district to do an inventory of faucets, toilets, bathtubs, spillcocks, washing machines, and cows. Anything that uses water. And we have the big book of house charges for 1959 to 1981. Right here, you can look up your house, if you know who owned it back then. For example, in 1959, the yearly charge for each faucet was $9, first toilet $2, extra toilets only $1, each bathtub $2, automatic washer $2, first cow is $1, and each cow thereafter only 50 cents. So the year's bill for Ernie Hurst was $14, Robert Wilson 14, Sam Ladd 14, Willie Storr 12, Everett and Helen Lyles 27. And the Drown Farm was 38 and Perrin Farm 22 because they had cows. It's simpler now. We charge $400 a year per house for all the water you can use, even if you're a summer person. Sorry, Bill, Raoul, etc. No meters, same for winter and summer. The big water users like the school and the nursing home clearly pay more. In 1958, the district bought land on the lake from Luther Eisenhart and built a pump house to supplement the water system in emergencies. In 1971, the Prudential Committee of Helen Lyles, Chouinard, and Wilson looked into financing a town sewer system and abandoned that idea as too costly. I don't know what the projected cost was. In 1972, after a much heated debate about hepatitis from drinking the lake water, the first 2 wells were drilled, another in 2003, and the last one in 2014. For ultimate security, when we lose electricity, we have propane-driven generators for running the pumps on our 2 best wells, so you get water no matter what. Now, we have a lot of leaks, which we hope we fixed. And John brought some pipe, and we have pictures of some really bad pipes. Ernie probably has a few pipes. And John will say something about the pipes, and then he will take over with any questions or stories about how Helen ran the show. If you don't know who Helen is, that's Janet's mother. She was the boss for a long time. She was John's boss.
So I went through this a little bit before, but this is an example of one of the old mains. This was by Willie's when it got dug up 2 years ago. And this leak here, this hole, which you can see the size of it, that's about 10,000 gallons a day leak right there. Oh. And it was down on top of a piece of ledge, so the water went directly across the ledge and into the brook, so you couldn't tell that there was a leak there. So that's a lot of water to lose in one hole in a system that's probably close to 3.5 to 4 miles. So there are millions of those. So this pipe came in 6-foot sections, so it's about 2 men could pick up a section. That's about the weight of it. This is oakum with a lead joint driven in. No lead inside. This is just cast. And so you had a joint every 6 feet from the reservoir all the way up through to the end of Breezy Avenue. So all potential leaks. Some of them just seepers, some are little tricklers, some are sprayers. But you didn't really know until they came to the surface, and then we'd get a call from Jan Travers quite often, and various other places in town. You know, the frost moves the pipes around and tweaks them a little, and then we'd go fix them, and then we'd fix that one, and we fixed this one. We did a lot of that. Maybe 5-6 years ago, we were spending $30,000 to $40,000 a year just on leak repair, which is, you know, it's like Band-Aid. So now that's gone, and we have this. And the seal is, there's a rubber boot, and then there's a hard plastic ring. And when it's put together, there's some lubricant, they're pushed together, and you can drive a truck over this, and it'll come back. It'll bend and come back. They're 7 feet down, so they won't freeze. Bedded in sand, there's a tracer wire that goes all the way from the reservoir all on top, so we can find it. I mean, if this makes a leak, you're going to find it, you know, really quickly from the amount of water. But so these are our connections on the small lines. This is lead-free brass with stainless steel rings with the same kind of. This is a Black's Point size, and it's the same kind of pipe as this. This flexible, semi-flexible, 200-pound pressure line. And this is an example of what goes into the main. There's a saddle that goes around the main. This threads into the saddle, this end here. It's called the corporation. You can turn that off with a wrench, and then you come out to this curb valve, which is where the homeowner owns it from here to the house, and we own it from here to the main. So if it leaks on this side of it, it's your dime. If it leaks on that side of it, it's our dime. So, but it's all new to here, the whole system basically that we did, except for East Street, which is down where I live. That's still somewhat old, 70s. So here's an example of some of the stuff we dug up. You can see the brass parts are pretty good, but the iron parts are very corroded and a lot of leaks. So you wonder, like, what did they do before they had the water company? You know, they had all these people living in town, and where did they get their water? Well, there are a series of pipes that go down from the lake that come down in front of my place on East Street, which fed houses individually. So people below the lake could get water directly from the lake. People that lived up on Breezy Avenue would get their water from, there were a series of springs up by where the circus is, Eisenhardt's, and they were all piped together with a lead line down through to the various houses on Breezy Avenue. But they, of course, ran out of water every summer when the springs dried up. And so people would have cisterns in their cellar. I know the Gulick house has one dug in the basement. The house on the beach road has one dug in the basement, so they would have access to some water for washing. No showers, no pressure. So, question?
I was just going to say, no, that the house next door, which is now the parsonage, had a big cistern.
That had a cistern also? Yeah, because they wouldn't get any flow from the lake because they're above the level of flow. So, any other questions on?
How does the tracer wire work?
It's a piece of copper wire, and it just sits in number 12 with a plastic coating, and it comes up in a little cast iron cap container right next to where the valves are that shut these off. And you hook one connector to that, and you hook another connector 500 feet away or whatever it is, and then you run a current through it, and then you follow it with a
So you charge
which we
it.
don't have.
You charge it.
David,
How is the cost of the new piping and the construction of the ditching distributed around the town?
it's not distributed around the town, it's just distributed to the fire district people. The town didn't pay for any of the stuff that went on.
So it's just the users.
Correct.
And over the years, how much time did it take you to repair one hole in the old pipe, and what did you plug it with?
Well, we never found one of these. We only found the little ones. We would put wraparounds, or we'd cut out a piece of pipe and put 2 wraparounds, and you know, get really muddy. And if it was wintertime, it was really cold. But
There's some pictures up here.
it wasn't a lot of fun.
No.
It wasn't a lot of
So
fun.
you folks did it, you didn't hire somebody?
Gary Bellavance and his son and his father actually have done that for us for years. But see, there was never really a map of the system, so we found the pipes when we found the leaks.
Have you been getting a lot of calls since this is?
Not zero.
Zero.
Those connections are very expensive.
Oh, the brass ones?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. That's good because they're buried and you don't have to go find them again. Yeah. This connection is probably, it's probably $80, I think, maybe, somewhere in there. But
How did they do water treatment for drinking water before all this system?
we did a chlorination system at the reservoir.
Before that, they were just drinking lake water?
No, we always chlorinated it.
Okay. But before
Lake water was,
before the reservoir.
Before the reservoir.
oh, before the reservoir?
That was
There was
spring
no
water.
treatment. It was,
With spring water.
it was
on
spring
tree,
water.
Right?
Yeah, on trees.
That's gross.
Yes, that was a treatment
Don't you
on that.
still chlorinate it?
It's periodically chlorinated. We don't have to chlorinate by state rules because we have 4 wells and we test for bacteria every month. We also test periodically for things like SOCs, which is a bill we just got the other day. Read some of those.
Yeah, we test for methylchloroendrin, dildrin, hexachlorine benzene, propylchlor. I mean, it's 2 pages.
These are all byproducts of pesticides and
$650.
hydrocarbons. That's one test.
How often do you do that, John?
This test we do
Too often.
probably every 3 years.
But we test.
We've been doing this for, oh, I don't know, 20 years. There's always 0. It's 0.
Oh, it's always there.
It's always 0. I mean, where's it coming from, you know?
Bar Hill.
Exactly. There's nothing above Bar Hill. It has to come out of an airplane.
But we test every month for.
Yeah, and lead and copper, I know everyone, that's big in the news. We test for lead and copper every 3 years. We don't have any lead and copper. We don't have any connections. We don't have acidic water, so that's usually a problem with soldered connections in people's houses with old lead solder. But we've been doing that for 20 years, I think, and we always have less than 1, they say, is, you know, it's, yes.
Big thing with dentists is fluoride. What do you get across? You know, I know it depends partially on each hill it drains off of, but what do you figure?
Is it naturally occurring?
Yes. Yeah.
I don't know. We don't add any.
So we'll have all sorts of dental caries and.
Depends on what you're eating, I guess.
The original springs that fed the old reservoir, is one of them located up above the Rutledge place back in?
There are 5 springs. 3 of them are above.
Comes across the road.
Let's see, I'm going to start the lower springs. At the reservoir, if you go northwest, up through the woods, and there's a wet spot that drains the field from the Bar Hill farm. There are 3 springs right against the ledge. all in quarts. The water's coming right out of the quarts. And they feed into a box and they come down. And then there's one way up behind the Bar Hill Farm, and it's a low building, and then that feeds to the Rutledge Spring, which is behind the house in the woods, and then that comes down with a cast iron pipe. I think it's 4 inches, maybe it's 2. And it goes it sits on top of the ground, basically, through the woods there. It's quite a walk, but it's kind of interesting how they laid it out. And it goes all the way across the field and crosses where Paige Stegner lives, and it's broken there, and it goes into the brook that feeds his pond. So there's a great system. They all ran gravity feed into the reservoir, and gravity feed, no power was necessary.
Hey John, with the new system that's in place, has it been designed for added capacity into the future?
Yes, I say yes. We need to probably, we're not going to extend a lot of lines. I mean, the 3 new structures up on beyond Breezy Avenue, the only reason they're there now is because of the new system.
Right.
Because they wouldn't have any fire protection with sprinkler systems without the volume of water necessary. So.
But as far as additional housing, if there's any...
Well, I think we have to work that out. That's between us and the state. The state looks at our capacity and looks at our usage and says yes, no, or maybe to a certain degree. You know, we obviously, if we could figure out a way to use the water out here, which is a lot of water, and find a way to make it potable to the point where the state's happy, you could, you could have a water park.
Oh, that's a nice idea.
Are all the fire hydrants in town so you can use them now?
Yeah, yes.
They're all usable,
Yeah.
so they can hook up to them and fire.
Yeah, and they all have 6-inch connections, what they call boiler connections, which can run it directly with increased volume. Cheryl?
What's the difference in gallons that you're saving now that you don't have the holes?
And leakage? About, well, we figured it out electric-wise. We figured out we were saving 20 to 30,000.
No, not per year.
Per day.
Oh, on gallons.
And gallons of leakage.
We know we've got the bills from Hardwick Electric, and so our Hardwick Electric bill is almost cut in half. So that means, and the rate's been the same. So we're pumping about half the water that we used to pump out of the ground, and obviously that was leakage. But we still have a problem in our reservoir right now. There's apparently a leak in the reservoir itself, which we never noticed before if it was there, because we had so many gigantic leaks. So we're contemplating doing something about that. The cost of that all those blue pipe is about 3.5 miles of pipe and 25 shiny new fire hydrants. Because before that, John said it earlier, you couldn't use any of the fire hydrants. The cost was a little over $3 million, and it doesn't affect any taxpayers except those who are in the fire district. And it's all done by water rates. So to pay for that, believe it or not, all we had to do is go from $200 a year to $400 a year, because we got a grant of about $1.5 million from the federal government. What's the matter with this thing? And we have a loan, and the loan goes for 40 years. So whereas our budget used to be around $35,000, $40,000 a year, now it's $95,000, and $65,000 of that is paying back the feds. But surprisingly, we can do it. And after another 10 or 15 years, $400 a year will seem pretty good. So we'll see.
I have a question about those cute little fire hydrants on Country Club Road. Why are they so much smaller?
Those are for just draining the system, for bleeding the system. They're at the high points. There's one on Country Club Road, and there's another one on Black's Point, I believe. 2 on Black's Point. And that's just to bleed the system.
How many customers do we have?
200.
200.
100 seasonal, 100.
200 hookups.
Hookups,
Yes, hookups.
yeah.
And about half are seasonal and half are year-round.
So the only reason we know we have a leak in the reservoir is we have 3 meters that we're using. 2 of the meters tell us how much water goes into the reservoir, And 1 meter at the bottom of the hill tells us how much is going into the system. And the math doesn't add up. So where's the rest of the water? Well, that was discovered in the process of working on the reservoir this summer that there was a leak. So we hired divers to come in to swim around. They put the suits on and they spray them down with Clorox, etc. They do this as a matter of course. And they swim around with a little squirt bottle of milk. And they hit all the corners and they squirt the milk out and they look for milk to disappear quickly. Well, unfortunately, they didn't find anything. So then we did it again. We have a video of that somewhere. It's really exciting. And so we did it again and they did not find anything. So the theory is now that the reservoir was poured, hand-mixed, hand-poured concrete with a lot of rock mixed in. And the theory is that it's by capillary action. If we fill the reservoir up, the rate of leakage increases. If we leave it at half full, it decreases significantly. Well, it's pointless to have a reservoir that's always half full. So now we're in the process of looking for an idea of finding some way to seal the interior of the reservoir. So we can save, what, 15,000 gallons a day or something like that?
10 to 15,000 gallons a day.
So to put that in perspective, right now, in the winter, we're using 18,000 gallons a day on a daily basis. So for using 18 and leaking 15, or whatever it is, it's, we'll cut that in half, because you still have to put the water in there for it to come down. So one of the workers that was on the crew this summer said you have a 1914 body with a 2016 hat. I thought she got that pretty good.
Maybe you could get the divers to come and paint inside the
Well, it's complicated. I mean, there are coatings, but we want to make sure they're non-toxic.
Yeah, that would be good.
Yeah.
Have they finished the roof?
Yeah, that's pretty.
Yeah, the roof is finished, yeah. And the 2 buildings, there are 2 buildings up there also. Yeah. Erica.
Oh, how did you have time to be a carpenter was one question, and why was the Lyles bill so high? That's the other question. Which hopefully we'll get into Helen.
Michelle will answer the first question.
Oh dear. Let's see. Nights and weekends, and a lot of leaving the carpentry job in the middle of the day to go. A lot of me leaving the house, driving around, trying to find out where John was, because that's often an unknown. Finding him, getting him to someplace where there was a phone calling Gary Bellavance, and then going to jump in a hole with Gary Bellavance during the day to fix it. So, a lot of interruptions.
We tried to do a lot of the repairs without turning the water off,
yeah.
which because turning the water off is never popular. Really not popular.
Yeah.
So John, if they, in the leakage that's going on up there, if they do discover you got to put in a line or something, how do you do that? You got to drain it and shut the water?
Drain it, dry it. We'll have 4 tanks.
And that shuts the water off to town?
No. We did that last summer. We drained it and it was empty all summer. Basically last summer there was no reservoir up there. There were 4 tanks, 10,000 gallons of water, plus we have the well 4, which pumps directly into, which is 45 gallons a minute. So between the pressure of the 10,000 gallons up high and the pumping directly into the main, everyone still had pressure and volume enough. Yeah.
I'd like to know why we spent $27. We had
Yeah,
one bathroom.
I can't answer that question, Janet.
Maybe there was they ran a garage at
Well,
that
we had one
time.
pipe out there.
Yeah, but maybe they didn't.
Did you
So
wash
how
cars?
many silk
Yeah.
One silcock house.
The
Hardly any
car
house.
wash, the car washing.
That's
You
probably
probably,
Car
probably had a
wash.
labor charge.
you know, they pump the water into the gas tank.
Larry.
I just wanted to say that the guy that done the job, Austin, and I have done an incredible job.
About these guys.
That's good to hear. That's good to hear.
They pass through my dooryard every morning and night, and some nights they wouldn't get out of there until 8:30 or 9 o'clock at night,
Yeah.
and that was himself. He was pretty much the first in and the last to leave. And they was awful accommodating for my cattle anytime, you know, something happened. He'd wait. He was a patient man, he was.
But we had good luck with the two contractors we used. Munson for the first phase, which was all the piping, and we had a lot of positive feedback from people in town, even though it wasn't convenient, you know, you had to wait in line in traffic, but they did a good job, and they did really well with public relations as well. And
yeah.
You know, I'm glad, you know, you probably saw George more than anybody.
Yeah. Yeah, incredible fellow, awful nice fellow.
Yeah, very nice.
But we wouldn't have been able to do the new roof on the reservoir if Larry hadn't agreed to let the big truck come in over his farm to get up to the top of Reservoir Road. There are a couple of steep parts of Reservoir Road and a big turn that they could avoid by coming through Larry's. Thank you, Larry.
Well, since we're doing the thank yous, I think we should also thank the Grays and the parents, because we have contiguous lands up there, and some of our well 4 is onto the parents and part of the Grays, and you need a 200-foot zone of nothing forever around that, and that kind of goes onto those two properties. And we got rights away from them to bring power in from the Gray property to our well 4 point, and for the public good, I think that's kind of what they went for.
No, one place along Reservoir Road where I think once upon a time there was like a pump house. Do you know if water was ever pumped up into the reservoir? Because I think there were a few of those pump houses that pumped springs, but I don't know if they pumped them out to the lake or they pumped them up.
I think they pumped them up. There's one below your house. It's
right.
like it's a little below,
down in there.
and I think they use they use a ram, like to kind of run the water up the hill. I don't know if it worked very well.
Power to them, because I found like the insulators and stuff. So these were energized.
Yeah. So they all had. You know, in the summertime, obviously the demand increases dramatically, and I think they would run out of water all the time.
Yeah.
I know over in Randolph Road, they had their own little water system over there with a pump, a gasoline-powered pump that they would fill tanks up at the top of Randolph Road, and then during the day, they would run out of water. When they ran out of water, people just stopped using it. And then, what was it, 1940 or something like that? The fire district took over Randolph Road, which kind of was a mistake because Randolph Road has more leaks than anywhere.
Also, there was, in that same area below Reservoir Road, there was a spring. There was always a water tub out by Johnny Black's barn that ran all the time. That was piped from the spring below Reservoir Road, went over to Black's.
Right, and Black. One of the deeds in one of the town books says that he has.
That's right.
He has the right. We can have what's over and above it, but he has the base right. So, or had it. Yeah.
Better let Ernie say something here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Greensboro Fire District number 2.
Wow, we're not anywhere near as big as you guys are. We're just a drop in the bucket. I appreciate, you know, do you ever get any phone calls during the night and say they don't have any water? Why'd you shut my water off? I paid my water bill. I say, look out and see if you got a light out there. If you don't have a light, then the pump doesn't run. But anyway, so. But I am, well, I'm the chairman, I'm the operator, the maintainer, I'm the committee. The only time I can get anybody to follow me is, we're going to raise the rates next month, we need a meeting, and boy, they're there. Outside of that, just give me water. But I have, how long have you been up here doing this?
Too long. About 40 years.
I inherited it from Warner Davis. Everybody know Warner Davis? He died one morning, and I came home from work that night, and everything was on my porch. That was back in the what, early 90s, I think it was. Yeah, but anyway. But we are a small system. Fortunately, we are, the system that's there now was put in '82, but there's some interesting history behind it. Since I had connections with the band when I was 12 years old, when I met my wife, but they had a spring in the brook that goes up Schoolhouse Hill. Everybody been up there? There's a brook that never runs out of water. Okay. Used to be an old wooden box, and the first user of it was Alex Machia. He had a farm, and he decided that the best way to get water, gravity fed, was go up and run a line down from that box, which is on his property, down to his barn, so he could water his cows. This was way back, I think even before I was born when that's put in. But then the town was having problems. Their spring boxes weren't springing like they should. Okay, and so they decided, somebody did way back then, why not hook on to the pipe at Alex's barn and run it down through the village, and we can have water. Well, that was a good idea, so they put in lead pipe, they put in black iron pipe, they put in anything they had back then. There were no curb stops and no shut-offs except at Alex's barn. And so it ran down in a 1-inch pipe. And if you wanted to get water upstairs, you put in Willie's. They had a rush on Willie's at one time when the brook seemed to dry down, selling 300-gallon water tanks, okay? Everybody put one in their cellar, put a pump in it, and they let it fill out, and the pump would come on, they have pressure all over the house. But in the morning, when Alex went out to the barn, he didn't want people stealing water from his cows, so he shut the town off. And when his cows were all watered, he turned the water back on to the town. So you either had to take a bath before 6 or after 6. But at 6, he shut it off. 5 o'clock in the evening, you better have supper ready. Everybody had hands washed because at 5 o'clock, he shut the water off. Water his cows and turned the water back on. If you drive by there, you'll see a big spray going out in the field, making a beautiful ice sculpture out there. That's water still running from that box. Only when we went to a new system in the bend, he went up and modernized it. He built a big concrete box with a lid on it and stuff, and left the same pipe, but he got the box in it. So that was the system. The problem was that it had leaks. And when you're running a 1-inch line, and I would say at the time there was probably about 8 or 10 people on it, you didn't get much pressure. Didn't get anyone kettle times of water. But in 1982, well, what they decided was they're going to try to repair the line because nobody's paying anything on it, so it's cheap water. Never was tested, and nobody died from it.
That you know.
So why not just leave it there and just patch it up? And so, but the problem was that somebody made an inquiry to the state. You should never do that. So they immediately condemned the whole system, and so in 1982 they got a grant and a loan, and it's a 40-year loan, and fortunately we're coming up on the end of 40 years. We paid $1,200 a year on it. We don't want to do anything with it because it's on like 1.5% interest, so we leave it alone. So we owe $6,000 on that. But anyways, so they ran new line, put in a new pump out. Wendell Winchester donated some land that was good for nothing, a swamp hole, but.
So you got a tax deduction.
Yeah, got a tax deduction. But anyways, so they put a new system in that runs the length of Main Street. It used to stop at the corner in front of the bend. There was a little hydrant there. We call it a flushing hydrant. And Stanley Allen was the last one on the end, and then Warren Hill hooked onto it, so he's the last one. And then Ruth Boobar, which is just above the mill, in the little Willie trailer, was the other end of it. And everybody from there up through got on the system except George Hussey. He had his own well, and it's funny though, he was part of the committee that designed the system and helped put it in and raise funds in the whole 9 yards, but he wouldn't hook onto it. I don't blame him. But anyway, so our system is very small. We have 17 customers or connections. We have 26 users, which means there's they get billed according, if you have an apartment house and you got 2 apartments in it, you get billed for 3 uses, okay, so. But it's no exception. We run into trouble with the post office. All we have is a toilet here. You don't get free water. But anyway, but I've been at it. My wife runs the books. I try to do as much of the maintenance, tank changing and all that stuff as I can because we're a small system. We operate on a budget of about $8,000 a year. When I took it over, we operated on an $8,000 budget and we only took in $6,000. So, and I get free water. You get a salary though.
Oh yeah.
You get $500 each.
Divided by hours worked.
Well, that's the same way.
Negative amount.
Ours is $42 a month, okay? And we still don't let you wash trucks.
That's what you charge, $42 a month?
Yeah.
That's more than we pay.
Yeah.
No, that's
And they're giving water away to you.
But when I took it over, it was $35 every 3 months. Everybody loved that. But we needed to do some work on it, need some changes. This system we have is called an aquifer. It runs by itself. There's a giant lake on this, never run out of water. If you could take a photograph, you could see the Gary Dimmick's paddle wheel down there running off the same water source down there, and it runs his paddle wheel, okay? So, when I took it over, this system here is not like yours. Ours runs on 6 pressure tanks, sitting on top of 2 3,500-gallon concrete storage tanks. So we basically have 5,000 gallons of water storage, and we consume close to 3,000 gallons a day. So we don't have much reserve, and we have just one well that's down 118 feet. And if I had met the engineer and the state official that designed that, I'd have shot them both. Unbelievable, unbelievable. This system has a 6-inch casing down through muck for about 50 feet. Then it goes into gravel for another 20 feet. Then it goes into clay. And then it went 3 feet into gravel. And the engineer said, great, 75 gallons a minute coming out of there. We'll shut it down here. And left it. No screen casing, no nothing. So, when I inherited this thing, it was a nightmare. It was an ingenious trick to keep water going to everybody's house. They put a pump in the well because the clay, how many of you have ever poured a glass of water, put a sponge in it, put a straw in the sponge and tried to suck water up to it? Doesn't work very well, but this is what was happening with the clay. See, the gravel disappeared. They didn't use the screen casing on the end, so it went into the tanks. 200 pails we dug out of there because there's no drain on the tank. My hemorrhoids never did survive that. The ladder of the heroin going up. But anyway, they put this pump in the well and they timed how long it took for the water to fill the casing and the pump would come on. Then they timed it as how long it would take for the pump to drain the casing and then the pump was shut off. Back and forth, back and forth. And some days you turn the water on and there was nothing because the pump quit working. Or there was so much usage they couldn't keep up with the system. And so this went on. So the first method of correcting that was we're going to drill the clay out. Okay. So we got Machia in there. $3,500. First of all, they put the wellhead on the mound where they put the tanks. And you know and I know you can't back a well truck up on an angle and try to drill a straight hole. So we had to dig that whole entire hill off to get to the casing so they could back in there. So they drilled it out. Clay come out all over the place. Great, we got water going everywhere now. Great water. Tanks running up, going out the overflow, no pump, no nothing, free flowing again. Lasted 2 years. Then the clay was back. So I called the state and we got a problem. I said, I don't know what to do. I said, we're back to clay in here. I said, I have no idea why they stopped that 3 feet below the clay bed and they're in good gravel, let's keep going. No. So he said, you can do anything you want in that hole, but don't try drilling another. So this time I said, so if we drive this casing down, can we do that? You can drive it till it comes out the other end if you want to, as long as you stay in the same hole. So we got Minash back again. And I said, we're going to drive this casing. We can't. I said, why? He said, it won't stand it. I said, why? It's welded iron pipe. I mean, it's, you know, a solid pipe. There's a 10-inch concrete base ring around the bottom of it. I said, how'd you get that on here? Did you send a little man down here with a bucket of cement? You bored a 6-inch hole, you put a 6-inch pipe in, how'd you get that 10-inch casing down? I said, you're gonna drive it down, okay? Or I'll get somebody to drive it down. So finally he agreed that he come in. So they drove it down another 18 feet into solid gravel. And then they packed the end of it. And we've been pouring out about 15 to 20 gallons out the overflow ever since. That was 2007. The good Lord's been good. I told the next time it happens, I'm going to get Moses over here and he's going to strike the rock with a stick. But anyway, so our system is fairly new. We have curb stops the same way. We are not metered. We have a master meter and that's another string until that cost us $2,600 because the meter quit. But I realized the problem with the meter when we're using 97,000 gallons a day. I've got a leak. So anyway, we got a new meter. 2014 they put it in. We just put a new meter in. The old one died after a year and a half operation. I said, that is strange. They put this one in 1982 and it lasted up to 2014 and this one didn't make it to 2016. So they charged us for it again. And so that's why you say $42, that's more. We have a maintenance cost and very few people to pay for it. And it's not the best system. They suggest that we put in another storage tank and drill another well. But tell that to the people. We expanded in 2012 to the little school. They ran out of water, and here again they've been using a shallow well spring for, I don't know, since Moses was around. And all of a sudden it went dry, and so they decided they're going to drill a well. So they got the engineers up there and they drew the plan up, sent it in the state, and they said, oh no, you can't do that. It's a public water system. Non-transit water system. You got 45 students and teachers there. So it's going to cost them big bucks. So that's when we became a fire district. Now I don't know what the distinction between the fire department and the water district, but they told us if we would become a fire district number 2, that we could get a grant minus some interest on it. So we voted, and just the ones that are on the system are responsible for it. So we voted and we had to put in a contact tank for chlorination. Okay. We don't chlorinate unless we absolutely have to. Sometimes we have to, but it's a free-flowing well. We don't run a pump. We got one in there. I drove and exercised it once in a while just to keep it going because it cost us $2,500 to put it down there. So. But the state said we didn't have enough contact time because the water had to sit in chlorine for X amount of seconds before it went on to the customer. So they put in a 24-foot long, 2.5-foot diameter tank underground over there that raised havoc with everything. And then we did it so that we could connect onto the school. So we bored a 850-foot line underground and ran a 4-inch line to the school down. Our system operates off a 3-inch PVC valve.
Dig it up.
What's that?
Explain to them the boring.
Oh, yeah.
How you did it. It's pretty interesting how that works.
Yeah, we, I don't know, you haven't got any, but we took a 4-inch casing, okay, and a pipe, plastic pipe on a roll. I was nervous about that. But they have a little machine that he sits there and he bores underground. He doesn't drill a hole, he pounds a hole through it, okay. They pounded a 6-inch hole down through from front of the school all the way down to front of the post office, 850 feet. And what was fascinating, if you stood out there on the road, you could feel it.
Wow.
And the guy's down there and he got headphones on and the guy's standing there and he has this meter and he can see the end of that bit. And he can tell whether it's going this way or it's maintaining. Here was a 7-foot depth. And he could tell whether it was coming up or whether, and he'd tell the guy back there, you got to tip it down. And the head of that thing would be down or go off to the right. And all the way up through it. It saved us $4,700. Doesn't sound like much, but when you're on a system like we have, $4,700 a lot of money. To do it that way than it was to dig up blacktop and roadway and the whole 9 yards. We had to stop. I had to chuckle. Warren's not here, is he? Okay. we were going by Warren's driveway down there, and he got on the phone and said, I got to get my trucks out. I got to get my trucks out. You can't shut me down. I said, we're not, Warren. We're going to go right underground, right by your place. And you can drive in and out all you want. So he said, you sure? And I said, absolutely. I said, there's no reason why you can't drive over. Okay, fine. So we got in front of Piltman's place down there, and there was a lot of riffraff in the ground down there. It's amazing what, I mean, it must be there was a big hole down there in the railroad and everybody else wanted to just throw everything in that hole and bury it. But every time they tried to go through it, they couldn't go through it and they kept going out to the middle of the road. And they'd pull it back and they'd try again to go out. So they finally dug it up. Well, so I kidded Warren about it. Somebody called up Warren and said they're digging up his driveway. You never see a truck come sideways around the road to pass. What's going on? You were supposed I said, nothing. Well, they're running their back. Well, I said, yeah, they're down to Piltman's down there, digging a hole in his front so we can get the pipe to there. That's all, and then we're going to close it down. You're not going to dig this up? Okay, so away he went. So I made his day mine too. But anyways, so the school operates off the system, and we have 2 commercial rates that we charge. That's $70 a month, and the store gets it, and the school gets it. Yeah, it used to be the church was on the commercial rate when it was going in its day, but doesn't use much more than the post office now. So, but and so the school's happy. I kept their system down there because, believe it or not, their old shallow well came back. And so if I have to shut the water off for some reason, the school can't go more than an hour without it. So I go down there and I disconnect and I reconnect them to their old system, and they're happy as a lark. They can't drink the water, but they can flush their toilets and they don't care. So anyway, so that sounds like I guess that's in a nutshell. But we have each household has a curb stop that you mentioned over there. That from our water system is a little different than yours. The owner owns the curb stop. They own from the curb stop into the house. If something goes wrong with the curb stop, it's their problem. We supply the water to it. We checked on that, but that's.
Then you lose control of the curb stop. We want to be able to turn somebody's water off.
Oh, I still have that right. Oh, yeah, I still have that right. I have a very big T handle.
And why is that?
You turn it off and somebody comes down and gets the wrench and turns it back on.
Right. We have some of those do that. But when I took it over, it was poorly managed. If people didn't pay, they didn't pay. So Warren and I sat down and had a long talk one day. And we decided. So Warren paid. We were going to do something different. But anyway, so that's our little water system.